tomorrow?
And
started. Welcome, everybody. In 2 minutes, we are about to start. I'm saying this also for the people that are online with us. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us in the Austrian room and for walking about 2 kilometers to reach here. This session on gender equality, it's about the right to body autonomy, a right for achieving gender equality. That was the title that was chosen. My name is Barbara Levacheni. I'm an expert in gender policies and communication and a feminist activist living in Rome. First of all, I would like to thank Kaidos for inviting me, for organizing this amazing panel, for giving me the opportunity to have a discussion and a dialogue with these amazing women. I'm truly honored. I would like to briefly introduce our discussion by sharing with you the news that a few days ago here in Rome, a feminist demonstration was blocked and repressed by the police. Activists were protesting against the general states of fertility, a summit of the religious and conservative establishment. That's because we are being subjected to the rhetoric about Italy becoming too old, about the collapse of society, and about a country that has fewer and fewer children and therefore needs to return to traditional values. In this traditional order, the family is considered natural and therefore heterosexual, composed by a man and a woman who are married and have children, possibly two, with the eldest being male and the youngest being female. Women are expected to be mothers, and their strongest desire, it's expected to be staying at home, having babies, and working for the family. We see how this vision is informing Italian policies in semantics. In the last financial law, the word woman was never mentioned. It was replaced by the word mother. In the name of the patriarchal order of the traditional family, we're witnessing the restriction of sexual and reproductive rights. Dublin legislation that gives anti-abortion activists a place in abortion clinics, shutting down health services for transgender persons, blocking the provision of free contraceptives for women, excluding lesbian and single women from medically assisted procreation and parental rights, and taking away management of anti-violence shelters and services from women's associations. These are some of the examples of how the populist far right is attacking women, their bodily autonomy and their freedom of choice, because bodily autonomy is a threat to this aspirational idea of a natural order. Finally, I don't know if we can say it's a success, but the results so far of this aggression to self-determination of women were that the last year we had fewer children than ever. And we had the lowest record of birth rates since decades. So it's not really working the plan. I know this is not happening only in Italy, and this is why I think that reaffirming bodily autonomy as a fundamental right needs a wide vision and a strong global alliances. The retrenchment is happening in many countries and is showing us that rights are never granted, and also that we need all women to be free if we really want to be free. I wanted to give you this overview, this nice context about how we are doing in Italy as a frame for our discussion. And I would like to introduce you the first speaker, that it's Monica Ferro. Do you pronounce it like that? Perfect. She is the director of UNFPA in office in London that she joined in 2017. She has worked to promote equality, development, and human rights for the past 20 years. Prior to joining UNFPA, Monica had a 20-year career of public service in Portugal, during which she served as a member of parliament as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Population and Development and Vice President of the European Parliamentary Forum for Population and Development, as Secretary of State for National Defense, as university lecturer, a media personality, and an activist. So it's really a privilege to have you here. We said that the panel's title is The Right to Bodily Autonomy, and that bodily autonomy is a right for achieving gender equality. And would you mind to take us back to the basics and explain us what do we mean when we say bodily autonomy and gender equality?
Thank you so much, Barbara. And I'm touching my phone because I'm going to set the alarm. Otherwise, I'll speak for half an hour. Thank you so much for setting the stage and for already starting what it's such an important conversation today. And I think you've just nailed it. All the critical issues that we need to tackle. And if you don't mind, while I was listening to you, I was thinking that this year, 2024, it's really it's an important year. I know all the years are important, but this one, if you think we will have more than 70 electoral processes in the world, about 4 billion people are going to go to the polls, and no matter where you live, there's a very high possibility that you will be asked to vote. Like, I'm Portuguese, so I've already voted for the general elections. I'm going to vote for the European elections. I just voted in the local elections in the UK. So why am I bringing this to your attention? No matter where you live, no matter the circumstances you are voting, population matters will be a big issue in all electoral processes. Either you think about migration, either you think about fertility, either you think about sustainability of social welfare schemes, population issues are going to be critical in all the electoral processes we're going to have throughout the world. The problem is, Barbara, as you just said, most of the people are not equipped to discuss population matters with a human rights-based approach, with bodily autonomy lens. And I've been saying this many times, and I'm sorry, Maria Grazia, you've already heard me saying this. When you think about population and you focus on a number, and you think that you've decided what's the optimal size of your population, the issue is that if you focus on numbers and not on rights, if you ask women, how many children are you having? Instead of asking them, are you having the number of children you want? If you focus on numbers, the problem and the solution is always the shape of the body of a woman. And this is what we are doing with these narratives focused on 2.1, the replacement rate. This is a number, all the demographers like this number. There's no evidence that this number really is beneficial to societies. You understand where the number comes from, right? A couple having 2 children, so then when they die, they are replaced. There's no other evidence on the virtues of these numbers, but still we are focused on replacement rates. And my call and UNFPA's call in our last report, the one before this one, the 8 billion people is, don't focus on numbers, because if you focus on numbers, the problem and the solution is always the shape of a body of a woman. We are too many. Let's prevent women from having children. We are too few. Let's force women to have more children. Let's block them access to contraceptives. Let's block them access to abortion. And I think that sometimes we use these narratives without understanding how they are undermining our bodily autonomy, our right to decide, this is my body and I own it. And we can discuss what is gender equality, the possibility of having opportunities, the same opportunities, regardless of how you identify yourself, regardless of the gender that you assume. But gender equality means nothing if you don't give women, and I'm going to focus on women, if you don't give them the possibility to own their body. If you don't control what happens with your body, you control very little in your life. And this looks like an easy conclusion to reach. But if you think on all the underlying enablers that you need to allow women to fully own their body, you will see that this is actually a radical agenda that obliges you to end gender-based violence, that forces you to give women access, forces you, it's a too harsh word. Sorry, because I think in Portuguese and I'm translating to English. So sometimes it doesn't, because despite the fact that I have this very Italian name, I'm Portuguese. But the call is to think broadly on what bodily autonomy means. And bodily autonomy means very, very simply, the right of every individual to own their bodies and to live free of coercion, to live free of any type of violence. It's about power. It's about agency. It's about being able to decide on the very critical issues of your life, to decide if you want to have a family, if you want to have children, how many children you want to have, the space in between births. And of course, this implies that you have to have access to sexual reproductive health, quality services throughout the life course. It's a very wide agenda that has to do with economic empowerment, but it has to do with access to health. It has to do with access to justice. It's much broader than just the simple affirmation that you own your body. And I know that some people see this as a new concept or as something that it's still very much on the making, but it's not. It's in the SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals, there's an indicator that measures bodily autonomy, and we are the custodians for that. So 4 years ago, we started 4 years ago, we launched the data 3 years ago. We asked women all over the world where we could access the questionnaires. We asked them 3 simple questions. Can you say no to sex? Can you choose your contraceptive method? And can you see a doctor when you want to see a doctor? 54% of the women said yes, which means that almost half of them said no to one of these questions. And this is what we decided to highlight as a lack of bodily autonomy. A woman who does not control what happens with her body controls very little what happens in her life. A woman who doesn't have bodily autonomy, who doesn't have the possibility to live free of female genital mutilation, free of child marriage, free of reproductive violence, cannot decide to stay in school, cannot decide to have a productive job, cannot decide to get involved in public life and politics. And all these issues that are paramount to gender equality, they have the basis for all this. It's really bodily autonomy. It's how you are free from all types of coercion. And the beauty of collecting data on bodily autonomy is that we have, for the first time, trends. We measure trends. And so last month, we just launched our new State of the World Population. And of course, we have many reasons to celebrate. There's progress. This year, it's also the year where we celebrate 30 years of Cairo. I don't know how much you know about the United Nations Population Fund, but we were created in 69 to provide states with data on demographic trends. A lot of countries were becoming independent. There was a lot of conversations about overpopulation, it coincided with the publishing of a book called The Demographic Bomb. So people were scared. People were scared that population would increase this way, resources would increase in a more, not in such a steep way. So, you would get to a point where there wouldn't be enough to feed the world population. So chaos, turmoil, wars, there was a lot of anxiety. So UNFPA was created as a technical fund to provide data, to provide a neutral basis for discussion so that when countries decided to plan their social economic programs, they would have data. A simple example, you want to build schools. You need to know how many children you're going to have in your country in order to build schools for the number of children you need, right? It's basic things like this. So as time passed, we, UNFPA, started to not only focus on, 2 minutes, right? Not only focus on numbers, but we started to focus on the human rights of the determinants of the demographic trends. We focus on maternal mortality, right? But we also need to focus on access to family planning. We focus on fertility, but we also need to focus on removing the obstacles that prevent women from accessing those services. So we say that in 1994, the golden decade of the United Nations, where you had all those groundbreaking conferences like Rio de Janeiro with 1992, the Summit of the Earth, 93, Vienna, when we said boldly, women's rights are human rights, 94, Cairo, where we say population has to be at the center of human development, where we talk for the first time about sexual and reproductive health, when we talked for the first time about reproductive rights. Beijing in 95 brought the sexual rights into the conversation, the bodily autonomy, but it was a crescendo, it's a momentum throughout the 90s. Our conference, the conference that gives us the mandate, it was Cairo 1994, so we are celebrating 30 years this year. And of course we say, there's a lot of progress. There's more countries than ever with laws banning FGM. There's more countries than ever in the world with laws criminalizing violence against women. Maternal mortality has decreased 34% still. What we say is still. Maternal mortality has decreased 34%, but since 2000, there's been no decrease. Since 2000, there's been no decrease. So what we are trying to alert countries and governments and communities is that despite we are on the right track, progress has slowed down, and in some cases it has decreased. And this is what I want to finish with. In some cases, progress has been slow, has been stalled, and on bodily autonomy, because now we can measure the trends, what we see is that a quarter of women still cannot make decisions about their own healthcare. A quarter of women. A quarter of women still cannot say no to sex with their husband or their partner, and nearly 1 in every 10 have no choice on whether or not to use contraception. So there's a long way for us to go, and this has to be very clear that it's a political decision. All this, and this is why UNFPA is working with governments, we are working with parliamentarians, we are working with private sector. We are just launching a new, and we are very excited about this, we are launching a new coalition on reproductive justice with the private sector. We want the private sector to know that they play an important role in making sure that all individuals, I focus on women, but all individuals have the right to reproductive justice, parental leave, menstrual health dispositions. Your health insurances should include access to contraceptives, to family planning consultations. So there's a whole lot of initiatives that the private sector can also take in order to fulfill the right to reproductive justice that is included in bodily autonomy, that it's included in the justice. And while I was doing this, I just noticed I'm wearing a bracelet. It's just a funny thing. So we did this bracelet. It's the menstrual health bracelet. I know it's an oversimplification because it has 28 white beads and 5 red beads. So it's an oversimplification of a menstruation, of a period. I know most people don't follow these patterns, but we needed to start somewhere. And it's very funny because just think about how many times you don't talk about these issues. You don't talk about something that happens in the body of so many people. Half the planet menstruates. Well, sort of. But it's something that we still don't talk because it's considered either, as we were saying, we were chatting before the beginning of the panel. It's either a private issue or it's something that people feel ashamed to talk about. My executive director says it's the only moment in your life where you bleed for days, where you are in pain for days, and you are not supposed to talk about it because it's something people don't want to hear about it. So a very bold agenda of bodily autonomy would be an agenda where this would be all out in the open, an agenda that would allow women and people in other vulnerable situations to claim openly, I own my body and I own it. I know I don't have time to go through this, but I own it in the physical space, but I also own it live, online. And I think this is very important. If you have the time, go to UNFPA and Google Body Right Campaign. It's our latest campaign where we say something very simply. We say, why is your body, why is the image of your body less protected than a work of art, than a song? It is as unique as any of these products still. If someone shares an image of your body without your consent, or if someone harasses you online, the legal protection you have, it's much less than if someone infringes your copyright. And this is something that we want also, maybe the G7 to tackle in their final communique. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I would like to give the floor now to Megan Lorraine-Beau. She's a feminist activist with over 10 years of experience in community engagement and in the promotion of women's rights. She's the president of the Ivorian League for Women's Rights, a feminist organization dedicated to promoting women's rights and combating violence against women. In 2022, she received the Franco-German Human Rights Prize, and she's also a communication and media professional. Megan is going to talk about control over women's bodies as one of the main manifestations of the patriarchal dominance. We would like to hear from you what is the relationship among body autonomy and violence against women, and how would you describe the situation in Ivory Coast nowadays? Thank you.
Barbara. Is it working? Can you hear me? No.
You have the green light.
Yeah. No working. Hello.
Because you were something.
Thank you, Barbara. I used to call my country. You say sometimes Ivory Coast, but it's Côte d'Ivoire. Actually, it's Côte d'Ivoire. We don't translate it. It's been translated over years, but we like to say Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire. Okay. So I come from a country where there is no right or law yet on reproductive right. I come from a country where abortion is still illegal, except for incest or where the mother's life is at stake. And I come from a country where women are considered as economic and tradable asset. When I talk about control over body, I'm talking from a feminist perspective. All the control over a woman's body lies on the concept of patriarchy and also on the concept of power dynamic. When you are born, the first thing that really belongs to you is your body. According to the Human Rights Declaration, we are all equal, we are all free. But how can women be free when the first thing that belongs to them is not their own? In my country and in West Africa, for example, like everybody has the right to tell you what to do with your body. The tradition, your family, the state, community, but you don't have the right to choose for yourself. Let me take you with me on a memory I have when I was 9. One day, my father just came to me and he just noticed that I started developing breasts. I was 9 and he was shocked. It was like, what is that? Go and talk to your mom and your grandmother. They need to do something. What was the something means? That something was that in my community and many other communities in my country in West Africa, when a young girl is too young for them to starting having breast, that we take a wooden spatula and that we eat, that we eat the breast to stop them growing. And the reason is that they think that if you don't have breasts, you won't attract like boys. You will be safe from rape and you won't seduce boy. So it's not about like security, it's about like boys' libido. So at 9, my family, my dad, my mother, and my grandmother, they chose for me. I didn't have the right to say no because it was my family. And actually, this is the story of many other women and girls in my community and all over Africa. A few months ago, we noticed that in Gambia, they wanted to allow female genital mutilation, who has been banned like many years ago. They want to start it again. In Mali, like a neighbor country, and Sierra Leone, female genital mutilation is still legal. We can mutilate women without like any risk. We can still doing it. Religion is still doing it. Community is still doing it. And I think that not having the control of your body is not having control, it's not having power. And as like the French feminist Simone de Beauvoir, I believe that women's rights are never acquired. They can be questioned any time. And when we talk about patriarchy also, it implies that everything about violence is a result of the power dynamic. Because sometimes we say that violence is about rage, is about libido. No, it's about control. It's about control over someone's body, telling that person, I own your body. I have the right to do whatever I want with your body. And you won't say anything. Like your state won't say anything. In French, for example, the French president used a term like demographic. I don't know how to say in English, but in French, it was like réarmement démographique. It's like demographic rearmament. Like we use woman body to go in war against what? Because they want women to reproduce, to make babies. So the state can choose for us, the community can choose for us, but we cannot choose for us. And I think today it's crucial to talk about that because we can see the rise of many anti-right movements. I was talking with Clara and she was right. She said that we need to tell the name. It's not pro-life, pro-whatever. It's anti-right movement. And for me, from a country, we don't have like sexual law. We don't have like the right to choose for what we want. And I know my country is not among the G7 like country. I know that sometimes we don't bring Africa at the table to talk about what is the best for us. And this is why it's important for me to be at this stage. And thank you, Idols, because I can share my voice, I can share my story, I can share my experience from a perspective of the Black woman and also from perspective of an African woman. And I think that we need to consider sexual and reproductive rights as the base of human rights. It's not something that is here and human rights is here. It's the fundamental basis of human rights. So when we talk about giving power to women, in English, it's so well stated, we say empowerment, but in French, sometimes we say autonomisation. It's like autonomy. You can have autonomy without having power. So talking about bodily autonomy is giving back the power to women. It's not about choosing when only, it's to choose when and have the access to health services. Because if you are poor, for example, in my country, abortion is illegal. but some people or some family can bring the children abroad to have abortion. And the people that are poor in the country will use like illegal ways, and they're dying. They're still dying in my country. Even when we talk about contraception, it's about also education. And I believe that the woman in the forest like village in my country should have access to sexual services as a woman like in the capital. This is where reproductive justice intervene. This is where we talk about reproductive justice. It's not only about the choice, it's also about can I have access to that as a person with disability? Can I go to the hospital when I want? As a person who is deaf, can I have someone to explain to me what is abortion, what is like contraception? This is everything about reproductive justice, and I think this is where, as an African country, I can from coming from an African country, I can say that there is a lot to do. A lot to do because we still have female genital mutilation. We still have like femicide in Abidjan, like the capital of my country. Only in 3 neighborhoods in 2020, we just noticed that we have about 400 femicide, and we now say femicide. How many do I have left? Good. We say femicide. Before, we're just saying murder. But now, as a feminist, with all my sisters, we fought to have a name, to name it. This is giving power also to say you are killing women because they are women. And this is femicide. And I think this is also like a victory for us, like telling the name, giving the name, calling them by the name, and is the first step to give women back the power over their body. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I would like now to give the ground to Carmen Ryan. Ryan. She works as director of institutional development in Fundación Huésped. She's a very active person in issues concerning sexual and reproductive rights, rights of LGBTQI+ people, and human rights. Carmen comes from Argentina, a country where the last decade saw a very strong feminist movement. And I wonder what the situation is now and how would you describe it?
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Eidos, for the invitation. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be here as part of this amazing panel, hearing so closely these amazing women with such a strong messages. So I'm coming here from Fundación Huésped, so I thought I would start with just a tiny bit presentation of who we are. We have been working since 1985 on HIV, and HIV led us to sexual and reproductive health and right. And why? It's because stigma, discrimination, and taboo are part of our institutional agenda, and working to promote access to medical services and supplies, as well as access to mental health, social security, and justice through law services led us to get involved not only on HIV and HIV key population, but also on acknowledging the importance of women's rights, transgender women's rights, and also how they impact on health. As Barbara was saying, we have been for the last, 10, 20 years working in Argentina to update our legislative background. So we have many advancements. In 2006, we have a sexual education law that grounded sexual education for every children in Argentina from kindergarten to university. Then we had equal marriage in 2010. Then we have gender identity law in 2012, granting the right to access to a name and to health for all the transgender community in Argentina. Then we updated the civil and commercial law. Then we worked for a program for preventing adolescent unwanted pregnancies that lasted for several different governments. Then we had on 2020, so close to now, our law for voluntary interruption of pregnancies. Until 2020, we weren't allowed to interrupt a pregnancy unless we had some of the considerations included on our penal code, so we wouldn't get prosecuted for having an abortion. And those excuses were really hard to get considered by the medical system. So many women were accessing illegal abortions on informal centers and as well dying. So in the past few years, we had all these improvements on our legislation, but these improvements are not the same for everyone in Argentina. These improvements are able to get us women, white women in Buenos Aires, some health attention, some rights, some access, but will be different in every province in Argentina, will be different in Santiago del Estero, will be different in Neuquén, will be different in other countries. Then having these legislations is a huge step and helps us all to walk a path towards accessing rights. But we need public policies to sustain the access to the rights that are claimed on those laws, that they are supposed to be everywhere for everyone. When we talk about reproductive health and rights, we need the children, the girls, the adolescents to know they have a right, for example, to access to the gender identity law and access to health service, so they don't do an intervention on their body to change it outside the health system, because that would endanger their health, that would cause severe pain on the long run. Many, many women in Argentina, even though we have had the gender identity law for more than 10 years, many women in Argentina are including silicones from the industry in their bodies because they are not being able to access to a health system. So as they don't access to the health system, they are endangering their health and from accessing to a life filled with pain to try to adapt their body to what they feel is right. So we need authorities to be there promoting the access to those rights everywhere, getting the girls, getting the adolescents, getting everyone to know they have a right. And now we have new authorities that won elections past year. And they claim safe abortion law promotes a crime that is a murder with an extreme gravity because of the bond between the person that has been murdered, as they claim. The state LGBTQ community is pushing for privilege and are, while they claim to respect the rights to choose, they deny discrimination. They say that their choice is to be as they are, and they use tons of metaphors that are promoting violence against that community. As I speak here today, the past Monday in Buenos Aires, a man chose to set in fire 4 women because they were lesbians. 3 of them have already died and 1 is getting care in a hospital. And well, I get the shivers when I say it. We need to speak about how when we silence the health and reproductive rights, when we silence bodily autonomy, when we silence about how discrimination and violence impact us all, then we are allowing these kind of crimes to get perpetrated. So the role of authorities in Argentina is key now to get us to access to our rights. We are facing the possibility to go backwards, to get the backlash we were hearing on among many other countries. And the authorities on the G7 have an opportunity to set the standard. When we are here on the C7 talking about bodily autonomy and we are being loud and vocal about those rights, we are setting the standard for many other countries that look after those messages. And when we are saying that bodily autonomy is a requirement for human rights, we are saying it's an obligation for every country and something we cannot move backwards for. So thank you again for the time and the opportunity to hear you.
Thank you, Carmen. Now, last but not least, Beatrice Mariottini from IDOS. She has an academic background in international relations with a specialization in migration and intercultural relations and a master's degree in gender studies. She is the advocacy officer of IDOS, and I would like to give her the floor to talk about a world there where a campaign that is promoting sexual and reproductive rights. And do we need it? I would say yes, all we shared, but I give the ground to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, first of all, to the panelists and to the moderator. Thank you for being here and for helping us to create this event. My name is Beatrice and I work for IDOS. We are an NGO working to promote the rights, the freedom of choice and the dignity of women and girls globally. And today, as Barbara mentioned, we are launching this campaign that is called A World Where. It is a campaign promoting sexual and reproductive health and rights and is organized by Countdown 2030, which is a network of associations that are expert in this field, of which IDOS is part of. And the aim of this campaign is to drive Europe's global commitments on sexual and reproductive health and rights to meet sustainable development goals, advance gender equality, and strengthen health system. As I already mentioned in the plenary this morning, we are sitting just outside the Red Room, and I invite you, if you haven't done it yet, to share your contributions as well and help us to imagine this world where finally SRHR are a reality for everyone. So I'm going to repeat and rebound on some of the concepts that have already been expressed, but I think that repetition is good, especially when we are talking about rights that are always on the line. So why is sexual and reproductive health and rights, which is an integral component of the right to bodily autonomy, so important? And why do we need to talk about it today in this context? So the most recent and reliable data shows us that an alarming percentage of women, 44% of women surveyed in 68 countries, I'm citing data from UNFPA, are currently unable to exercise bodily autonomy. Nearly half of all the pregnancies globally are estimated to be unintended, which means either unplanned or unwanted. And nearly 1/3 of all women in low and middle income countries enter motherhood during adolescence. So this alarming situation tells us, as the panelists before me have already explained, that we definitely need bolder political commitments to foster human rights centers agenda and make sure that every human being can enjoy the rights that we all intrinsically possess. So this year, Italy assumed the presidency of the G7, and this is why we are all here today. But 2024 also marks an important anniversary, as Monica has already mentioned before me, which is the 30th anniversary of a historic process, a milestone for women and girls' rights, which is the Cairo Conference. We know that significant progress has been made since 1994 to protect bodily autonomy and advance SRHR, but we also know that we still have a long way to go. A few days ago in New York City, the 57th Commission on Population and Development took place to assess the implementation of the program of action of the Cairo Conference. The commitments that were made back then were reconfirmed, but unfortunately getting to the final political declaration was very hard. The negotiations were very tough because the number of conservative countries and also anti-rights, that's the right choice, or also anti-choice movement across the globe are gaining more strength, and they are obviously hindering and hampering women's free choice. So we definitely need urgent action to increase funds to ensure that the enjoyment of these rights is protected. We also need stronger political commitments to protect the association, the women associations, the feminist associations that work on the ground and that over the past 3 decades have ensured that this progress kept on going. But why is bodily autonomy so important, and why is it a prerequisite to enjoying other rights? So as we already said, bodily autonomy is the right to make decisions about your own body, about your life, your future, without violence, without retaliation. It includes the choice of whether to have sex or not, the use of contraception, whether you can go to the doctor or not. So obviously, SRHR are an integral part of bodily autonomy, but they do not exist in a vacuum. They are not separate from other rights, as Megan was also explaining. They are intrinsically linked with so many areas of our life. And that's why when more people have access to these rights, they are healthier, they are happier, they can contribute to society, they can participate, they can be agents of positive change in our communities, and so on. So when these rights are guaranteed, a world of possibility opens up, from securing the economic well-being of families and communities to bridging the gender equality gap, fighting for climate justice globally, and so on. They can have the agency to decide, for example, over their partners, their relationships, if they want to have children, how many children they want to have. They are less prone to STI. They are less vulnerable to gender-based violence. So accessing these rights is fundamental to secure education, economic independence, public health, and political participation. So I would say that protecting these rights is an act of love to ensure that our communities are safe, they are successful, thriving, and no one is left behind. But I would like to take this argument a step further, because as we've all seen, especially with the COVID pandemic, we are all interconnected, right? So when inequality rises somewhere else, or for someone else, the rippling effects are felt by the whole society. We must also bear in mind that we cannot approach issues using a silo approach, because everything is connected. And I do not only want to aspire and ask the G7 leaders to guarantee these rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, but what I personally aspire to, and I'm sure that most of you will agree, is implementing a sexual and reproductive justice framework. What does it mean when we use this word justice?
it means that we do not only want to enjoy the right to decide over our own body, whether or not to have children, the spacing between children and so on, but we also want to enjoy a life that is free from gender-based violence, for example. We want to live in a healthy environment. We want to have decent living conditions, decent working conditions. And adopting a sexual and reproductive justice approach requires taking into account all these different intersecting forms of discrimination and also analyze power systems. Because if we only stress the importance of having a choice, we are forgetting a crucial aspect that is access. We cannot just have a choice, because if there is no choice where there is no access. The choice cannot just be there. It has to be accessible for everyone. So gender, racial, and class inequality, as well as other systematic injustices, undermine the realization of these rights. But they are not at the moment sufficiently addressed by health and legal systems. We must stress the importance of taking into account all these different layers and all these factors if we want health policies that are truly human rights centered and that are accessible for everyone. So in this sense, bodily autonomy is not just a prerequisite to the enjoyment of other fundamental rights, but at the same time, other rights are also a prerequisite for bodily autonomy. And I would like to end my speech, I'm sorry for going over time, with a quote that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is a quote from Audre Lorde. There is no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives. And I think that sums up what we discussed today, and thank you.
Thank you. Before opening the floor for questions, I would like to take some recap. And Monica said control over our bodies is the first thing to have control over life. Megan said giving bodily autonomy is giving power to women. Carmen added rights are not enough without policies and resources. And without policies and without resources, they become privileged. Beatrice added how sexual and reproductive rights impact on well-being and on the well-being of society at large. And they also raised up the issue how the G7 could be setting the standard of bodily autonomy. But setting the standard is not enough without an intersectional approach guaranteeing access to all and within a larger gender equality framework. I don't know if you would like to add anything. It's like making it very brief and very compact, but I now wonder if there are questions from the floor. Please use the microphone because we have people also online.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. My name is Dr. Murthy Mini. I'm from the US and I was a part of the Global Health Working Group. So I just wanted to say that as a physician and an advocate, what you said, Monica, and I was a consultant in UNFPA in New York, is women don't have the choice. And I have found working, women are scared to ask for contraception. They have to get the permission of their male partners. This is a big issue. And as you said, so many people are voting. I'm from the US and I don't know what's going to happen to us. We see like so many states like Arizona, Alabama. I am lucky I live in New York, which is a much more liberal. But at the end of the day, what really bothers me is the rate of illegal abortions, unsafe abortions is increasing because the US is one of the largest funders to UNFPA. And when the global gag rule hits the floor, it's horrible. So unfortunately, politics are always brought into women's health. And as somebody who's been working in policy for more than 25 years, to me, it is like, it's our body. Why should a man, like somebody with 2 chromosomes, tell us and one, why missing? It's not that, I hate men, But I'm just saying, we always say that the Y has one arm less, and so we have the double X. That is just to get some humor in. But at the end of the day, I think we all have to work towards it. It doesn't matter which country you're in. Our rights are being trampled on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We take another question from there and then we. Oh,
Thank you so much. Thanks for the panelists for great contributions and insights. I'm Patricia Miranda. I am the Global Advocacy Director of the Latin American Network for Economic and Social Justice. And I would like to, more than a question, it is a comment on how to cross-cut this, the gender perspective with other issues that from the work we do is really important. So all the things that you've mentioned in the panel are really crucial to point out strongly what we used to say about economic justice. And first, it's important to say that economic policies are not gender neutral. And when we talk with the International Monetary Fund, or when we talk with ministers of finance, they don't get why it's not gender neutral. And the global economic policies could, under the current context, they are deepening inequalities instead of contributing to close these gaps. This is to current global economic policies are not contributing to fulfill women's human rights. That is an important call to make. And I wanted to mention two issues, debt and tax, and austerity measures that are linked with debt. They imply that the citizens, but specifically women, don't have access to public services, quality public services, but in general, they don't have full access. And what we saw, at least in Latin America, after the COVID pandemic, the statistics reflect that the domestic debt of women increased after the pandemic on health, because women took care of their families that had COVID, and it increased more than domestic debt of men. So those are important linkages that it will be good to make it more solid. And in terms of a tax, regressive taxation that most of southern countries have a higher impact on women. First, for their women's expenditure structure, that it's mainly for food, for health, and also because of the incomes inequalities. So I wanted to just raise that all the policies about and that the G7 has in terms of core economic policies can contribute or can undermine the fulfillment of women's human rights. Thank you.
And I'm from Mauritius. I just had one question for maybe Monica and Megan. I was really interested in knowing about the three questions that Monica talked about in terms of the demographics and the geographical location of those people who have been saying no to the questions. And also why, because this is in line with what Megan is saying. I'm from the African continent, and much of gender equality and the things that people are doing, I can take the example of my mother, and there's some stuff that's been done back home. And when I ask, they say, c'est la tradition, it's the tradition. How do we navigate that actually?
so the last question and then we can. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. Yeah, it's working well. Thank you first to all of you for this great session. It's good to be able to have like a true session where we actually talk about the issues, and not only like stating that yes, there is progress in terms of women's rights, but that we're not there yet. I'm Laura from the Civil Society Engagement Mechanism for UHC, also known as System for UHC 2030. And I've worked also closely with Carmen in many sessions, especially on social participation to empower civil society in having a voice in health making decision. And something I wanted to raise also, it's more of a comment and how we can make the link is that we're facing a lot of challenges in resolution, all type of resolution, the UN HLM resolution last year, the INB negotiation, even the resolution we are working on this year on social participation, which is very important and key for us all to have a voice. I mean, women, but also men, like we all concerned about this one, is that we have a huge challenge in terms of gender. It's the states of negotiation is very polarized, and literally a lot of member states and countries don't want to have any reference to gender and are completely blocked any mention on sexual and reproductive health. We really fight for that during the UNHLM, and we almost lost consensus on that, which would have ended up in no resolution at all. So I'm wondering if, you know, there will be, I know the negotiation at private, but if there will be any way for us to raise that in maybe a public stage to say, yes, we're making progress, but there is a state at the international level that is very worrying. So yes, just a global comment on that, and thank you again.
Thank you. Great
Maybe
panel.
Catherine.
Everybody was incredible speakers. What
Catherine.
was very sad to hear was that the countries, we seem to be going back. We're not moving forward. And that's very sad as a woman that believes we should have the choice and have access to every possibility for our own sexual reproductive rights. So my question to all of you is, why is that happening? I mean, why are we, you know, everything we've been doing for 20 years seems like it's just useless. We're going backwards. I mean, I'm American originally, but I've been in Italy for the last 22 years, but I've seen the US, I think we have somebody else here from the US, seems like we're reversing. We're going in a different direction. So my question to all of you is, you know, what can we do to get to move that into a different direction? And why do you think it's happening?
Sì, a questo punto. It's really the last one.
Hi. Working? Okay. So I'm Alicia Steri, a student from Global Governance in Tor Vergata, and I wanted to reconnect to the last question, basically, because, for example, I'm writing my thesis on the CEDAW Convention and on the Istanbul Convention, making a comparison and analyzing the problems in the application. And my question is, we signed conventions, we made conferences, and on paper, there are many promises and things said about women, but the actual implementation of this convention is not working because of many reasons. For example, delayed reports made to the committees, and for example, the difficulties in monitoring, and the fact that these treaties are binding but the recommendation are not. So which would be, in your opinion, the actual solution to many beautiful words on paper, but the actual resolution that it's continues to be insufficient? Thank you.
Thank you. And we have online a question from Misa Tussar that says, what role can international cooperation and partnerships play in advancing the gender equality agenda, and how can we leverage global frameworks such as the SDGs to drive progress? So I think that we have, yes, we need another, but we have tradition and gender norms going backwards, going forward.
economic and budgetary policies and issues, and challenges for the global agenda. So I would start from, I don't know who wants to start? Monica.
I'll be short. So first of all, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you for inviting UNFPA, and thank you to our civil society twin idols. Thank you for all the support, and thank you for the amazing work you've been doing. And I think that what was said in this room fills me with hope. And you think like this woman is a masochist, you know, why am I hopeful? Because there's a lot of awareness, and that's already important, you know. So I'm 52. I grew up in a moment where rights were being conquered. You know, I have this sense of progress. You know, each passing year, so I was born, Portugal was a dictatorship. So I was 2 years old and Portugal became a democracy. So for me, the story of my life is a story of rights being conquered. Now I look to my daughters and I feel that they will have to fight for rights that I thought were done. You know, I thought, you know, equality. I thought that by now we would have economic empowerment that would be done. You know, still the World Economic Forum tells us that it's 200 years until we have economic parity for women. And the World Economic Forum is not a feminist organization, as you can imagine. So, you know, the alerts are coming. And I think that makes me kind of hopeful, because I know that the young generation is very mindful that they need to fight. And you need to fight for words. You know, I spent 6.5 years in Geneva, in the Human Rights Council, in the World Health Assembly, and I saw the pushback. And the pushback is stronger when the progress is also stronger, because there's something that people they never want to share. They never want to share power. You know, people are very easy in sharing work, in sharing knowledge, but sharing power is a different thing. And we are talking about power, as Megan said from the beginning, you know. It's about who has the power to grant access. And we think that we should have the power, that the rights are ours. They just have to be fulfilled by the state, which is the entity that has obliged, as you just mentioned, Carmen, public policies. What's the purpose of having a good right written in laws, but then there's no public policies to secure? When we talk about a human rights-based approach, you know, it's a mouthful, but it really means that you have to have access. You have to have the right, you have to access to information, but you also have to have the right to services. What we call the triple AQ, that I thought it was really a bad word, but it means that you have to have services that are acceptable, affordable, accessible, and with quality. And this is a human rights-based approach. You know, I have to have access to sexual reproductive health and rights, and I have to have access to those services, but in an acceptable way. The colleague that just asked, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, but it called about tradition. You know, there's none of these rights are incompatible with tradition. What we need to be mindful is that, you know, social norms were created to give us a sense of belonging. You know, we are part of a group, and social norms come as the strategy to make you part of that group. But and I think that when we say you need to change social norms, it sounds daunting because it's a huge thing. But the good thing is that social norms are constructed; they can be deconstructed. And for me, if there's pain, if there's suffering, there's no longer culture. It's just human rights violation. There's nothing cultural in female genital mutilation. It's a matter of power that has so many harmful consequences on women, you know, mental health, physical health, whatever. So we are very hopeful that the Gambian law won't reverse, but we are very worried about that. So I think there's so much that we could say, but I think that the bottom line is to make sure that we are all mindful that bodily autonomy is the founding stone of all the human rights. If you cannot control what happens to your body, you cannot control anything else in your life. And this means that you have to have access to rights, to services, to products. And of course, when you are a rights carrier, someone has the duty to fulfill your rights, and it's a state. It's very clear. This is why we work on human rights. This is why we work in global health. But of course, the state cannot do it all by himself. This is why partnerships are also very important. Partnerships with civil society, partnerships with the private sector. And I'm not going to ask how many of you think that the private sector have a big role to play in this game, but they do have a big role to play. And what we are trying to do is make the private sector understand that they stand to gain. You know, I hate doing this, but how much would companies benefit if their women were healthy, productive, happy, if they were not worried if they have to rush home and get their kids, or if they didn't have to choose because they have more than one and they cannot afford childcare. So maybe they will drop out of their paid job. How much does a company lose in potential, in the possibility of attracting the best? And this is what we are. I don't like the economic argument. I prefer a human rights-based argument, but sometimes you have to do it. You know, I was a parliamentarian. Each time I needed to go to the finance minister to ask for money, I would have to go equipped with very strong economic arguments. And this is why we are, of course, advocating for the budget, for the impact, for the gender impact of budgets. I think it's an excellent tool, because sometimes governments don't understand the impact. You know, every policy has a gender impact. They are not neutral. Climate change is not neutral. Poverty is not neutral. It's not gender neutral. And I think that there's a deep understanding about all this. And I think that if I can speak on behalf of UNFPA, this is the type of partnership that we really want. You know, each one of you bringing their own expertise to the conversation. And this is why, despite of all we heard, I'm very optimistic. Thank you.
And I do agree with Monica about we gain some rights and some push back. And I think that policies can do something about that. In France, for example, today abortion is in the Constitution. This is a huge victory. That means something. It means that even though we can see a backlash, there are some action that can give us hope. And this is something about that. And talking about tradition are made by human beings. In my country, for example, back in the day when a king died, for the burial, we were obliged to kill someone, a servant, to put that person in the coffin, so that in the afterlife, the servant can still continue to serve the right. It's not happening today. That means they know what is good, what is not good. In my country, for example, the women that were doing like female genital mutilation, today we use like a strategy. It was about money. It's because when they're doing that, they are paid for that. So today, the government in this particular country, particular region, is creating jobs to empower this woman economically, so that they won't be like obliged to do this again. So we are trying to find like some strategy to fight back also. And as Monica was saying, it's because we have some rights today that people are still pushing back. So it like it's not only like black and white. It can be sometimes gray. We can see that we have some rights. People are still pushing back, but we can still doing something with education. I was saying to Monica that education is different from instruction and intelligence. There are people in my village that are never gone to school, but that can come in that stage and give you a perfect structured speech about what they want. And this is education. So we need to go back to the basics and start educating our kids, start thinking about how we can restructure the educational system, because when at school, the teacher tell to the girl, what a shame, boys, she's a girl and she's the first in the class. This is something that shouldn't happen. So we need to restructure it also. We need to talk about education. And last, we need to go to parliament. We need to be at strategic decision-making places. This is where everything is made. So in countries like maybe in G7 country and African country, we need to think about how we can change things in politics. for years, we have been afraid to speak up, to take stage, to say that I want to be involved in politics. Some people in my country, women are scared about politics. And even though I'm not in the political party, I'm doing politics as a feminist because I'm talking about policy, I'm pushing back. I take the stand and talk to president, to minister about what is not going on in the country. So this is also politics. You not need to be in the political party to make change in politics. So yeah, it's my point. And vote. Yeah.
I'm gonna connect with that word actually. Vote. Monica was saying when she started speaking, how many people in the world are going to vote this year? And it fills us with some hope, the idea of voting. It also connects me in Argentina with the past voting and the past election, where we got a result that was a pushback. This pushback is so organized, so coordinated, and so well prepared that we need to think about it really deeply, really thoroughly. And we went to ask during the summer to, I don't know, like 120 people that had voted for this new government, what they felt about HIV people, what they felt about rights of women, what they felt about our agendas. And what we found many things, but what was more certain was that they were convinced that those advancements, those advancements that we grew up with and our daughters are going to have to fight back for, were presented by politicians to the voters as something that will make them lose the power over their economy. Like, economy is going to flourish if you get all those agendas out of the government. If we stop talking about femicide, if we stop talking about gender, if we stop talking about abortion. So even though I don't clearly understand why, I'm hesitant about many of the reasons we read about every day, I do believe that we have to speak really loudly and we have to protect the voices of women, of feminists, of journalists working for women, because on this coordinated pushback, we are mostly journalists and women openly speaking about feminism in media are taking the harsher push when they are being pushed over outside the agenda. And also we need to build new narratives. We need to be able to convince those voters that we are not against their rights, that our rights are their rights, because there were many women voting for those ideas and thinking that we had gone too far. So we need to find new ways to dialogue and new ways to speak with the voters that are sustaining this pushback, because if not, then we are not going to be strong enough to support the things that our mothers, our sisters gained.
I will try to be brief, but I was not kidding when I said that we probably would need another whole panel to discuss the backlash on women's rights and why it is happening and what is the solution. Well, first of all, I would say that progress, unfortunately, is not linear. We cannot take for granted that progress is linear, and especially I think when we're talking about women's rights, we can never take them for fully acquired. Megan was quoting Simone de Beauvoir saying that our rights are always on the line. And it's true, because all it takes is a political crisis, an economic crisis, and we see our rights being rolled up and we see this backlash before our eyes. We are living in a time of polycrisis. So
I think this is why we are seeing this backlash on women's rights. And the bodies of women have always been considered a commodity. So as I said, our rights, unfortunately, are always on the line. We always have to monitor. We always have to fight for our rights, because we will never, I think, be able to say, okay, that's done. Gender equality is fully realized. We all have our rights. We will always have to fight. And now the solution, I don't have the solution. What I can say is the fight continues, la lutte continue. All we can do is to keep on fighting. I agree with Megan, we have to be present in spaces where decisions are being made. That means at the national level, in parliaments, in governments, at the international level. For example, UN processes. I cite UN processes because for work, I follow these processes. So, for example, the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, the CPD, Commission on Population and Development, we see that in those UN spaces, anti-rights movements are infiltrating and they're growing stronger. They are stronger than ever. And I think we make a huge mistake if we overlook those spaces and take for granted that they are progressive, because unfortunately they can be infiltrated, and we see that the things that were taken for acquired in the 90s, as Monica said, they're not that granted anymore. And probably if we were to negotiate on the same issues, we would not see the same outcomes today. So all we can do is to keep on fighting, keep on being present in those spaces and make our voices heard. That's the only solution that we have, unfortunately, or fortunately.
And I would add that without saying goes with producing data, monitoring, advocating, and demonstrating. So thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Thank you, Beatrice, Carmen, Monica, and Megan, and have a nice Civil 7.